The wedding hall was alive with the soft hum of conversation, the gentle clinking of glasses, and the occasional burst of laughter. It was a warm evening, and the golden light from the chandeliers reflected off the polished wooden floor, creating a welcoming and festive atmosphere. A young woman moved through the crowd, carefully balancing trays of sparkling drinks and small plates filled with delicacies. She was focused, her eyes scanning the guests to make sure everyone was attended to, her steps quiet but purposeful. She had worked at events like this before, but every time felt slightly different, a mix of anticipation and the small thrill of being part of someone else's special day. She carried herself with a quiet grace, blending into the background as most servers do, but there was a sense of attentiveness in the way she moved, a gentle care in how she placed a glass on the table or offered a warm smile. When someone thanked her, her thoughts drifted occasionally to the music playing softly from the corner, where a grand piano stood. She had always loved the sound of piano music, its ability to fill a room with emotion, but today her mind was on her work, keeping everything running smoothly. Then, from the other side of the room, a guest noticed her. Perhaps it was the way she paused for a brief moment by the piano as she walked past, or the faint glimmer of recognition in her eyes as she looked at the keys. The guest, curious and slightly playful, leaned over to a companion and whispered something, pointing discreetly at her. A few moments later, the guest called out in a friendly, almost teasing tone, asking if she could play the piano. The words seemed to hang in the air, and she froze for a moment. Her heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected anyone to notice her connection to the piano tonight. She had spent years learning to play, hours upon hours practicing and refining her skills, but it had always been a private part of her life, a talent she had kept mostly to herself. She had played at small recitals and local events, but never in front of a crowd like this, and certainly not while working as a server at someone else's celebration. The guest's voice was warm, encouraging, and there was a hint of insistence. "Come on, just one song," the guest said with a smile. The room seemed to grow a little quieter, the ambient noise of the party fading as the words sank in. People nearby began to notice, curious about the exchange, some smiling, some exchanging amused glances. It was a playful request, but it carried a sense of anticipation. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. She hesitated, feeling a mix of nervousness and excitement. The piano was not just an instrument to her. It was a bridge to another world, a place where she could express emotions that words could not capture. Yet, the idea of performing in front of a crowd she didn't know, while wearing her uniform and carrying the role of a server, made her stomach twist with anxiety. She took a slow breath, trying to calm the fluttering in her chest. The guests were watching, their eyes bright with curiosity, waiting for her response. Her hands brushed lightly against the polished surface of the piano. The keys were smooth, familiar under her fingertips, and a rush of memories came flooding back. She remembered the hours she had spent practicing as a child, the lessons with a patient teacher who had encouraged her to feel the music, rather than just play the notes. She recalled performing at small gatherings, the quiet pride she had felt when someone praised her ability to convey emotion through the piano. All of it seemed distant now, overshadowed by the pressure of this moment, yet at the same time, it reminded her that she had the ability to create something beautiful if she chose to. She took another deep breath, letting the warmth of the room and the cheerful energy of the guests settle her nerves just slightly. Slowly, she approached the piano, her steps measured, her mind focused on the keys in front of her. The guests began to circle, sensing that something unexpected was about to happen. Whispers spread quietly among them, a mixture of amusement and curiosity. Some were skeptical, wondering if a server could really play, while others were intrigued, eager to witness the surprise that seemed to be unfolding before them. As she reached the piano, she paused for a moment to let her eyes adjust to the soft lighting that fell across the keys. She could feel the smooth surface under her fingertips, the coolness of the ivory and ebony waiting to respond to her touch. Her heart raced, a mix of fear and anticipation, but there was also a spark of excitement. This was a chance to share a part of herself that had always been hidden, to reveal a talent that few people knew existed. The guest who had requested her to play smiled warmly, nodding encouragingly. "Just one song," they said again, their tone gentle but insistent. The surrounding guests leaned in slightly, the murmur of conversation fading as they focused their attention on her. Some pulled out their phones, not wanting to miss the moment. Sensing that this could become a memorable highlight of the evening, she took her seat at the piano, her hands resting lightly on the keys, feeling the familiar shape and texture beneath her fingers. She closed her eyes for a brief second, letting herself remember the flow of music, the rhythm, the way the notes seemed to tell a story all on their own. Her mind raced with possibilities, wondering what song to play, how to begin, how to capture the attention of this crowd and make them feel what she felt when she played. Her first touch on the keys was tentative, soft, almost hesitant. The notes sounded simple, almost fragile, but they were enough to draw the eyes of the guests, who now watched in silence. A few exchanged glances, some smirked slightly, thinking it might be a modest attempt, but others leaned forward, sensing that something special was beginning. The young woman felt the weight of their attention, but also a sense of freedom. For the first time that evening, she was not just a server, she was a musician, a storyteller through her music. As the initial notes filled the room, she began to remember the confidence that had always been part of her playing. Slowly, her fingers moved more fluidly, the hesitance giving way to familiarity. The melody started to take shape, soft at first, careful, as if testing the waters. The guests remained silent, captivated by the unexpected performance. Some held their breath, surprised that someone who had seemed so ordinary moments ago could create such a sound. The room's energy shifted subtly. The soft chatter of the wedding reception faded into the background, replaced by the gentle music that now seemed to command the attention of everyone present. She could feel the warmth of the room, the curiosity and expectation of the guests, and it gave her a quiet strength. Her nervousness didn't disappear entirely, but it became part of the performance, a subtle tension that added depth to her playing. For a few moments, it was just her and the piano, a private connection amidst the public setting. She let her fingers explore the keys, each note flowing into the next, each chord carrying a hint of the emotions she had kept inside for so long. The melody was simple yet expressive, a gentle introduction to what she was capable of. She noticed the shift in the room. The guests were no longer talking or moving about. They were watching, listening, caught in the unexpected beauty of the moment. The guest who had first asked her to play looked at her with admiration, a small smile on their face, as if they had known all along that she could create something extraordinary. Others whispered to each other quietly, their words full of surprise and appreciation. The young woman felt a mixture of pride and relief. She had taken the first step, and it had already made an impact. As she continued to play, the nervous energy in her chest slowly transformed into excitement. She could feel the rhythm, the flow of the music, and the growing connection with the audience. The room seemed to hold its breath, each guest drawn into the melody, some tapping their fingers lightly on tables, others closing their eyes briefly, letting the music wash over them. It was a moment of shared experience, a sudden and beautiful pause in the lively wedding celebration. In that instant, she realized something important. This performance was not just for the guests, not just for the playful request of a curious attendee. It was for herself. It was an affirmation of her abilities, a chance to show a hidden side of herself that had always existed, but had rarely been seen. The piano, once a private sanctuary, had become a bridge between her inner world and the lives of those around her. She took a deep breath, feeling the anticipation build, but this time it was accompanied by confidence. She had crossed the threshold from nervousness to possibility. The first few notes had been a test, and now she was ready to let the music grow, to explore the depth of what she could convey. The guests sensed it too, leaning in slightly, their eyes bright, their expressions a mix of curiosity and admiration. They were about to witness something they hadn't expected, a talent revealed in the most unassuming of circumstances. For the young woman, the moment was exhilarating. She had stepped out from behind her role as a server and into the spotlight, if only briefly. The piano under her fingers was no longer just an instrument. It was a medium through which she could speak without words, share emotions that were difficult to express otherwise. The room was quiet, attentive, and alive with anticipation, the kind of silence that comes before something remarkable is revealed. And so, she sat at the piano, her fingers poised above the keys, feeling a mix of nervousness and anticipation. The room was quiet now, the usual chatter of the wedding fading into a respectful silence. All eyes were on her, guests leaning forward in their seats, standing at the edges of tables, some holding their phones, ready to capture what they were sure would be an unforgettable moment. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the flurry of emotions swirling inside her. Her first touch on the keys was soft, almost hesitant. The notes were simple, gentle, like a quiet whisper in the middle of the room. She could feel the tension in her body, the pressure of the crowd, the uncertainty of what to play. But at the same time, there was a spark of excitement. She realized that this was a chance, a rare opportunity to show a part of herself that had always been private. She let herself remember the countless hours she had spent practicing in her room, the feeling of connecting with the music, letting it flow through her, becoming a part of her. The first few notes carried a delicate beauty, and slowly, she began to settle into the rhythm. Her fingers moved more confidently across the keys, tracing patterns she had memorized, yet also allowing space for improvisation. The sound was light, but it captured attention, drawing the listeners in. Some guests exchanged surprised glances, unable to believe that the server, someone they had barely noticed before, could play with such sensitivity. A few leaned forward, curiosity and admiration evident in their eyes. As she continued, she became aware of the emotional power of the music. It was more than just notes on a page. It was a language of feelings, a story unfolding with each chord and melody. She let herself be carried by the rhythm, her fingers dancing across the keys with increasing confidence. The music started to fill the room in a way that shifted the mood entirely. Where there had been casual laughter and conversation, now there was awe and attention. The sound seemed to wrap around each guest, touching something deep inside them. She glanced briefly at the crowd, noticing their reactions. Some had their eyes closed, letting the music wash over them. Others were whispering softly to each other, astonished at the talent they had stumbled upon. A few guests were even holding back tears, moved by the unexpected beauty of the performance. The young woman felt a mixture of pride and humility. She had never played for such an audience, never in such an unplanned and spontaneous way. And yet, here she was, creating a connection through her music. Her initial nervousness began to fade, replaced by a quiet confidence. She remembered her teacher's advice from years ago, to feel the music, not just play it, to let her emotions guide her hands. She let go of the fear of judgment, focusing instead on the sound, the flow, and the reaction of the room. Her fingers moved with greater freedom, each note more expressive than the last. The music was becoming more intricate, weaving a story of beauty, emotion, and surprise. The guests were captivated. They watched as a seemingly ordinary young woman transformed before their eyes, revealing a hidden depth of talent and emotion. The energy in the room shifted. The laughter and casual chatter were gone, replaced by an almost reverent focus. Some of the guests who had been skeptical now looked genuinely impressed, exchanging looks of disbelief and admiration. Cameras clicked quietly, phones recorded the moment, and a few people whispered words of praise that carried across the space. She noticed the bride and groom watching, their expressions a mix of wonder and delight. The bride's hand rested lightly on her partner's arm, eyes shining, as if seeing something magical happen in the corner of their celebration. The groom's mouth was slightly open in astonishment, clearly taken by surprise. The young woman felt a warm glow of satisfaction knowing that her music had reached them, had touched them. It was a moment she would remember forever, not just for herself, but because she had become part of someone else's special day in such an extraordinary way. The melody grew richer, more confident. She allowed herself to explore the piano fully, moving from gentle, delicate notes to slightly bolder, more expressive passages. Her hands moved with purpose, her movements almost instinctual, guided by a deep understanding of rhythm and emotion. The music began to tell a story, though she didn't consciously think about it. Each chord, each rise and fall of the melody, spoke of hidden talent, of passion, of someone stepping into their own power. Guests were leaning in closer, some with their heads tilted in wonder, others whispering softly, asking each other how she could play so beautifully. A few older guests exchanged knowing looks, perhaps reminded of their own experiences with music, feeling nostalgic or touched by the performance. The room was no longer a typical wedding reception. It had transformed into a small concert hall, intimate and filled with admiration. She felt a surge of emotion as she played, a mix of excitement and freedom. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a voice, an extension of herself, speaking in a way words could not. Each note carried a little piece of her history, a fragment of her dedication, her practice, her love for music. The audience was not just listening, they were experiencing it alongside her. Caught in the unfolding beauty, the music began to build, growing more complex, more layered. Her fingers moved deftly, sometimes racing across the keys, sometimes lingering on a single note to let its resonance fill the air. She could feel the room responding, the energy of the audience adding to the rhythm, the collective breath of the guests almost guiding her hands. She felt a sense of exhilaration, realizing that this spontaneous performance had taken on a life of its own, far beyond anything she had anticipated. As she played, she noticed small gestures from the crowd, a hand resting lightly on a chest, eyes closed to savor the music, smiles spreading slowly as the beauty of the melody sank in. Some guests were clearly recording the moment, their phones held high, capturing what would become a cherished memory. Others were simply lost in the sound, fully present, their expressions reflecting awe, surprise, and delight. The young woman felt a deep connection to each person in the room, even those she had not spoken to or met before. Music had a way of bypassing words, reaching directly to the heart, and she could sense that it was working. She felt the weight of her nervousness dissolve entirely, replaced by the sheer joy of creating something that mattered, even if just for this moment. Her confidence grew with each measure, her fingers moving faster, more assured, and yet with grace. She noticed the subtle shifts in the audience, the way people leaned closer, the soft murmurs of admiration, the wide eyes filled with wonder. She realized that her talent, which had been a quiet, private part of her life, was now being celebrated publicly, even if informally. There was a quiet thrill in that realization, a sense that something remarkable was happening, something that could not be fully anticipated but could be fully felt with each chord. She felt herself letting go of her fear, embracing the music fully, allowing it to guide her movements, to dictate the flow of the story she was telling. The audience seemed to hold its collective breath, hanging on every note, drawn into the unfolding narrative. The room was alive, not with the noise of celebration, but with the shared experience of beauty, the kind that comes from witnessing a hidden talent revealed in the most unexpected way. Time seemed to stretch as she played, the minutes slipping by unnoticed. The young woman was immersed, her attention entirely on the piano. Her emotions poured into the melody. She was no longer just a server at a wedding reception. She was a performer, a storyteller, and the piano was her voice. The audience could feel it, could see the transformation, and the energy in the room was electric, yet gentle, filled with admiration and quiet awe. As she reached the final notes of her piece, she felt a wave of fulfillment. The melody had grown, evolved, and now came to a gentle resolution, each note lingering in the air, resonating with the hearts of those who had listened. The room was silent for a brief moment, as if everyone collectively held their breath, savoring the ending, unwilling to let the magic dissipate too quickly. Then, slowly, applause began to ripple through the crowd, growing louder and more heartfelt as guests expressed their appreciation. The young woman allowed herself a small smile, a mix of relief and pride. She had faced the unexpected request, the nerves, the attention, and had created something beautiful in the process. The music had done its work, capturing the hearts of those around her and transforming a simple wedding reception into a moment that no one would forget. She felt a quiet joy, knowing that her hidden talent had been revealed, even if just for a short time, and that it had left an impression that would linger long after the evening ended. As the young woman played, the room seemed to transform around her. The guests, who had been initially curious, were now fully captivated by the music. The simple, tentative notes from the beginning had grown into a flowing melody, each chord carrying emotion that resonated deep within the hearts of those listening. The soft flicker of the chandeliers reflected in the polished piano surface, casting a warm glow over her focused expression. Her fingers danced across the keys with increasing confidence, moving with a rhythm that was at once natural and mesmerizing. She felt a wave of exhilaration as she played. The nervous tension she had felt moments ago had dissolved entirely, replaced by a sense of connection to the music, to the room, and to the people around her. The piano, once a quiet sanctuary of practice and private reflection, had become a bridge linking her to the crowd. Each note carried a piece of her history, a fragment of her emotions, and for the first time, she shared it openly. The audience, sensing the sincerity in her playing, responded in kind, their attention and presence adding a subtle energy that seemed to guide her fingers. The melody evolved naturally, gentle at first, then slowly growing in complexity and depth. She experimented with subtle variations, delicate trills, and soft arpeggios that added texture to the music. The room, filled with guests who had been engaged in conversations and laughter just minutes ago, was now silent except for the resonant sound of the piano. Even the children, usually restless in social settings, sat quietly, mesmerized by the unexpected performance. She glanced briefly at the crowd, noting their reactions. Some were leaning forward, eyes wide with astonishment, while others had closed their eyes, allowing themselves to be enveloped by the melody. There were tears glistening in a few eyes, subtle but unmistakable, as the music touched something deep and personal. Some guests whispered softly to their companions, expressing surprise at the depth of her talent, while others simply sat in quiet admiration. Each reaction reinforced her confidence, urging her to explore the piano further. Her hands moved with greater freedom now, each note flowing seamlessly into the next. She felt as if she and the piano were engaged in a quiet conversation, responding to each other instinctively. The music carried a story, though not one with words or a defined plot. It was a story of emotion, of hidden talent revealed, of courage in the face of uncertainty. With every chord, she conveyed more of herself than words ever could, and the audience felt it, drawn into her world through the language of music. The young woman's heart raced with excitement as she continued. She allowed herself to be playful at times, weaving in unexpected flourishes, moments of delicate improvisation that surprised even her. The guests leaned in, caught by the spontaneity and authenticity of her performance. Some exchanged smiles of disbelief, murmuring softly, amazed that someone who had appeared so ordinary as a server could create something so extraordinary. Phones were raised, quietly recording, though many seemed content to simply watch, fully present in the moment. As the music deepened, the emotional resonance grew. She could feel the collective breath of the audience, the subtle movements and expressions, the way the room had become a shared space of wonder. The melody carried hints of joy, melancholy, and hope, a reflection of the complex feelings that lay beneath her calm exterior. Her fingers flew across the keys, sometimes striking soft, gentle notes, sometimes hitting powerful chords that seemed to fill every corner of the hall. The contrast added a sense of drama and life to the performance. Holding the audience's attention completely, she noticed the bride and groom, standing together near the back, watching in amazement. Their expressions were a mix of delight, astonishment, and deep appreciation. The bride's hand rested lightly on her partner's arm, eyes shining as she watched the young woman perform. The groom nodded slightly, a smile of genuine surprise on his face. They whispered quietly to each other, clearly moved by the unexpected beauty of the performance. The young woman felt a warm glow of satisfaction, knowing that her music had touched them so personally, enhancing the memory of their special day. As the melody continued, the room seemed to pulse with energy, the audience's attention fully captured. The young woman felt a powerful connection with the guests, a shared understanding that went beyond words. Music had a unique way of bridging gaps, of communicating what could not be said, and she was experiencing it fully. She felt a sense of freedom, of release, as if each note allowed her to express emotions she had held inside for years. The music was alive, and in that moment, she was alive with it. Her confidence soared, and she began to explore the piano more boldly. Her fingers glided over the keys with fluidity, combining technical skill with emotional expression. The melody built and layered, sometimes gentle and tender, sometimes strong and commanding, creating a rich tapestry of sound. The audience was mesmerized, drawn into every nuance, every rise and fall of the notes. A hush fell over the room, as though the music had created a sacred space within the wedding hall. The young woman could feel the energy of the audience flowing back to her, each reaction, each subtle gesture reinforcing her performance. She noticed the variety of responses, the awe in some faces, the tears in others, the soft smiles of delight, but each was a testament to the power of the music. She felt a sense of validation, not from the applause or admiration, but from the knowledge that her talent had connected with people on a deeper level. She had revealed a part of herself that had long remained hidden, and it was being received with genuine appreciation. She allowed herself to lose track of time, to become fully immersed in the moment. Her hands moved instinctively, the music shaping itself through her touch. Guided by intuition and experience, she could feel the story evolving, a journey that started softly, gained momentum, and now carried layers of emotion that resonated throughout the room. The audience responded, not with words, but with presence, with attention, with the silent acknowledgement of something extraordinary unfolding before them. The young woman noticed small details in the crowd, the couple holding hands tightly, the elderly guest with a tear glistening in their eye, the children leaning in curiously, the faint smiles of those who had been skeptical at first. Each observation added to her sense of purpose, encouraging her to play with more depth, more honesty. The music became a dialogue, a subtle exchange of energy and emotion between performer and listener. She continued to explore variations, weaving in delicate embellishments, subtle shifts in tempo, and gentle pauses that added drama and emphasis. The melody carried moments of surprise and delight, drawing audible reactions from the guests. The room felt alive with the presence of the music. Each person engaged in a shared experience that transcended the ordinary. It was a moment of connection, a rare instance where music bridged the gap between performer and audience, revealing something profound about human emotion and talent. As the piece approached its climax, her fingers moved with increasing speed and precision, the notes cascading in a torrent of sound that held the audience in rapt attention. The power of the music was undeniable, filling every corner of the hall, touching each person in a unique way. Some guests were visibly moved, wiping away tears, while others simply watched in awe, their expressions reflecting amazement and admiration. The young woman felt a sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had reached the peak of her performance, that her music had achieved its intended effect. The final notes arrived gently, a soft resolution that allowed the audience to exhale collectively. There was a brief moment of silence, as if the room itself was holding its breath, savoring the lingering resonance of the music. Then, gradually, applause began to build, first softly, then swelling into a chorus of appreciation. The young woman allowed herself a small smile, a mixture of relief, pride, and joy. She had faced her fear, embraced her talent, and created something extraordinary in a setting that had seemed ordinary only moments before. The guests continued to applaud, some standing, others leaning forward, all expressing genuine admiration. The young woman rose from the piano, her cheeks flushed, her hands still tingling from the performance. The applause was not just for the music, but for the courage, the vulnerability, and the beauty she had shared. She felt a quiet sense of satisfaction, knowing that this unexpected moment would become a cherished memory for everyone in the room, including herself. As she stepped back, the energy in the room shifted once again. The guests, still smiling and talking quietly among themselves, reflected on what had just happened. The wedding, already a joyful celebration, had been elevated by an extraordinary moment of talent and emotion. The young woman, though she returned to her role as a server, carried with her the profound sense that she had made a difference, that her music had connected with people in a way that would linger long after the night ended. She had transformed an ordinary evening into something unforgettable, and in doing so, had revealed a part of herself that would never again be hidden. The music continued, now flowing more naturally than ever. The young woman had fully embraced the piano, allowing her emotions to guide each note. The room seemed transformed. Guests who had been quietly observing moments before were now fully absorbed in her performance. Some had leaned back in their chairs, closing their eyes, letting the sound wash over them. Others were leaning forward, captivated, watching the movement of her fingers and the subtle expressions of concentration and joy on her face. Each chord she played carried a depth of emotion, subtle yet powerful. It was not just the technical skill of the music, but the feeling behind it, that mesmerized the audience. The melody weaved through joy, longing, hope, and a gentle sense of nostalgia. Every note seemed to speak directly to the hearts of the guests, resonating with feelings that they themselves might not have been able to express. In that moment, there was a connection between the pianist and the audience that transcended ordinary understanding. The bride and groom watched intently, holding hands, their eyes bright with admiration. They exchanged quiet whispers, smiles spreading across their faces. The bride's shoulders relaxed, and she leaned slightly closer to her partner, as if the music had lifted a weight from the celebration, adding a profound layer of emotion. The groom's face was full of awe, clearly moved by the unexpected brilliance of the performance. Neither of them had anticipated such a display, and yet they were completely captivated. Around the room, subtle gestures revealed the impact of the music. Guests who had been chatting or laughing earlier were now still, listening with rapt attention. A few guests wiped away tears that had quietly formed, overwhelmed by the unexpected beauty of the performance. Children, who had been fidgety moments before, now sat with their hands folded or eyes closed, caught in the spell of the melody. Every person seemed to feel the music differently, yet everyone shared in the common experience of being touched by it. The young woman's fingers moved fluidly across the keys, each note falling naturally into the next. She felt completely in the moment, absorbed by the piano and the energy of the room. Her nervousness had entirely melted away, replaced by a quiet confidence and a deep sense of satisfaction. She had stepped beyond her role as a server and was now fully immersed in her identity as a musician. This was a revelation not only for the audience, but for herself as well. The melody shifted subtly, growing more dynamic, She introduced gentle variations, soft flourishes, and unexpected harmonies that added richness and depth to the music. The guests reacted instinctively. Some leaned forward with expressions of amazement, others smiled broadly, clearly enjoying the surprises woven into the piece. The room seemed to pulse with a new energy, one that was not loud or chaotic but profound and intimate, as if everyone present were sharing in a rare, fleeting moment of magic. She noticed small details in the audience, the way a couple exchanged a look of shared delight, the way an older guest's hands rested lightly over their heart, the subtle nods of appreciation from friends who had doubted at first. Each of these gestures reinforced the power of the music, reminding her of its ability to connect people, to evoke feelings, and to create lasting memories. The realization brought a quiet sense of humility and gratitude. As she understood the importance of what she was sharing, the room had become almost suspended in time, a space where the ordinary faded and the extraordinary could take its place. Guests were fully engaged, caught up in the ebb and flow of the melody, the crescendos and diminuendos mirroring the emotional highs and lows of the celebration. Even the staff who had been working quietly in the background paused, briefly caught in the beauty of the performance, their usual tasks forgotten in the moment. The young woman allowed herself to explore the full range of the piano. She varied the tempo, moving from soft, tender passages to slightly faster, more spirited sections that added contrast and excitement. Each shift in the music was intentional, guided by her intuition and emotional connection to the piece. She felt a sense of liberation in the freedom to express herself, to reveal a hidden depth that had been her secret for so long. The audience responded instinctively, their attention unwavering, their admiration growing with every note. Some guests whispered softly to each other, expressing their surprise and delight. "I didn't know she could play like this," one murmured. "It's incredible," said another, eyes wide. Even those who had initially doubted or thought it was a playful request were now fully convinced of her talent. The young woman felt a quiet thrill knowing that she had exceeded everyone's expectations, including her own. Her music began to take on an emotional intensity, drawing the audience further into the experience. Each note was deliberate, carrying a subtle weight that touched the hearts of those listening. The melody built gradually, ebbing and flowing, creating a sense of journey and discovery. The young woman felt a deep connection to the people around her, sensing their reactions, their engagement, and their emotional responses. She realized that her music had the power to move, to unite, and to inspire. The bride and groom were particularly moved. They exchanged smiles and held each other's hands tightly, feeling the beauty of the moment. The bride's eyes glistened with tears of joy, and the groom nodded silently, fully absorbed in the music. They whispered to each other, clearly understanding that this was a once-in-a-lifetime experience, an unexpected gift that had transformed their celebration into something extraordinary. The young woman continued to play, each chord carefully considered, each melody flowing naturally. She felt a profound sense of satisfaction and fulfillment, knowing that she was sharing something deeply personal and meaningful. The audience was completely captivated, hanging on every note, every subtle variation, every emotional nuance. The energy in the room was electric, yet gentle, a shared appreciation of talent, courage, and beauty. She noticed the subtle ways the music was affecting the guests, the smiles, the quiet tears, the soft exclamations of awe. Even the children, who had been restless earlier, were completely absorbed, their attention held by the music. The entire room had become a shared space of emotion, a temporary sanctuary where the ordinary concerns of the evening were replaced by the extraordinary power of music. The young woman felt a sense of liberation as she played. The music had become a conduit for her emotions, allowing her to express herself fully. Her hands moved effortlessly over the keys, each note reflecting her joy, her nervousness, her pride, and her passion. She had taken a step into a new space, one where her talent could be seen and appreciated, and the response from the audience reinforced her confidence. As the piece approached its final moments, she allowed the melody to soften, the notes lingering in the air, creating a gentle resolution. The guests listened intently, savoring the last sounds, the fading resonance of the piano. The silence that followed was powerful, a moment of collective appreciation, as if everyone were holding their breath, reluctant to break the spell. Then, gradually, applause erupted, first softly, then growing into a heartfelt expression of admiration and joy. The young woman rose from the piano, her cheeks flushed, her heart full. She smiled, acknowledging the applause, feeling a deep sense of pride and fulfillment. The audience continued to express their appreciation, some approaching her with kind words, others simply nodding in quiet respect. The performance had been more than a simple musical interlude. It had become a shared experience, a moment of connection, and a revelation of hidden talent that would be remembered long after the wedding ended. The bride and groom approached her, expressing their gratitude and admiration. Their eyes shone with happiness, and their words were filled with genuine appreciation. "That was incredible," the bride said softly. "We didn't expect anything like that. You made our day unforgettable." The groom nodded, adding, "We are so grateful. That was truly special." The young woman felt a warm sense of accomplishment, realizing that her music had added something unique and memorable to their celebration. As she returned to her duties, serving guests with a smile, she carried with her the knowledge that she had touched hearts and created a lasting impression. The applause and admiration lingered in the room, a reminder that her hidden talent had been revealed and celebrated. She felt a newfound confidence, an understanding that her music could move people in ways she had only dreamed of before. The room had been transformed, not by grandeur or spectacle, but by the simple, profound power of her piano performance, leaving an indelible mark on everyone present. The last notes of the piano had barely faded when the room erupted in applause, a wave of sound that filled every corner of the hall. The young woman, still seated at the piano, felt her heart race with a mixture of exhilaration and relief. She had done it. She had taken a moment that began as an unexpected request and turned it into something unforgettable. Guests were clapping, cheering, and some were even whistling in admiration. Their reactions were genuine, heartfelt, and filled her with a sense of accomplishment she had never known before. People began to approach her, one by one, offering words of praise. Some held out their hands for a shake, others placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, and a few simply smiled warmly, unable to find words for the astonishment they felt. The room was alive with energy, but it was not loud or chaotic. It was a deep, shared feeling of joy and admiration. Even the children, who had been sitting quietly during the performance, now clapped enthusiastically, some jumping up and down in delight. The bride and groom made their way toward her, their faces glowing with happiness. The bride took her hand, her eyes shimmering with gratitude. "That was more beautiful than anything I could have imagined," she said softly. "You've made this day even more special." The groom nodded in agreement, his voice steady but full of emotion. "We will never forget this moment. Thank you for sharing your talent with us." The young woman felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of pride and humility. It was a recognition not just of skill, but of courage, the courage to step into the spotlight and reveal a hidden part of herself. Guests continued to gather, eager to express their appreciation. A few whispered to one another, marveling at the transformation they had witnessed. The young woman, who had begun the evening blending into the background, was now at the center of attention, not because she had sought it, but because she had shared something genuine, something beautiful. Her performance had touched hearts, and the effect was visible in every face in the room. The music had created a connection, a shared moment that went beyond words. Guests who had not known each other well now exchanged smiles, their appreciation for the performance linking them in a subtle way. Even those who had been skeptical at first were now part of the quiet awe that filled the hall. The young woman had not only performed music, she had created a bridge between people, a sense of unity and wonder that would linger long after the applause ended. As she stood, still feeling the lingering vibrations of the piano under her fingers, she took a moment to look around. The room was alive with reactions, a mosaic of emotions: joy, amazement, surprise, and gratitude. It was humbling to see how a single act, prompted by a simple request, could have such an impact. She realized that her talent, which had long been kept private, could reach and touch people in ways she had only dreamed of. The thought was both exhilarating and grounding. A few guests approached with quiet questions, asking how long she had been playing, where she had learned, and if she had ever performed professionally. She answered modestly, explaining that she had studied for years, but had mostly kept her music personal, a private escape and a source of personal joy. Their eyes widened with admiration, and they nodded, clearly impressed by the depth of her ability and the courage it had taken to share it. Some of the staff and servers, who had watched from a distance, now came closer, congratulating her. They had seen countless events, but rarely had they witnessed such a spontaneous and impactful performance. Their smiles and nods of respect added to the sense of accomplishment she felt. For the first time that evening, she truly felt recognized, not just for her service, but for who she was and what she could do. The young woman felt a profound sense of fulfillment, Music had always been a private part of her life, something that belonged only to her and the quiet spaces she practiced in. But tonight, it had become a gift, a bridge between her inner world and the hearts of others. The realization was powerful, a reminder of the beauty and potential that lies in courage and self-expression. She had not only shared music, she had shared a piece of herself, and it had been received with warmth and admiration. The energy of the room slowly began to shift back to the flow of the wedding. Guests returned to their conversations and laughter, but the atmosphere had changed. There was a sense of lingering magic, an undercurrent of shared experience that would not fade quickly. Conversations included references to the performance, stories of astonishment and praise, and the memory of the young woman's hands moving gracefully over the keys. It had become a highlight of the evening, something everyone would remember. She returned to her role as a server, moving quietly among the tables, but her steps were lighter, her posture taller. There was a newfound confidence in the way she interacted with guests, a quiet pride in what she had accomplished. People looked at her differently now, not just as someone who served drinks and food, but as a talented individual who had touched hearts with her music. The recognition was subtle yet powerful, a reminder of the potential that each person carries within them. Throughout the remainder of the evening, she was approached repeatedly by guests wanting to express their admiration. Some asked if she played often, others if she had considered performing professionally. She answered humbly, but inside, she felt a growing awareness of her own abilities and the possibility that this night had opened new doors. The experience had shown her that talent, courage, and authenticity could create moments that were truly unforgettable. As the evening drew to a close, she reflected on the journey that had begun with a simple, unexpected request. What had started as a casual question from a guest had grown into a profound moment of connection, expression, and recognition. The piano, once a private refuge, had become a conduit for emotion, a bridge linking her to the audience in ways that were deeply human and universally understood. She felt grateful for the opportunity, for the trust of the guests, and for the courage she had found within herself to embrace the moment. The bride and groom thanked her once more as they prepared to leave the hall, their faces glowing with joy. "We will never forget tonight," the bride said softly. "You've made our wedding more memorable than we could have imagined," the groom added. "It's not just the music, it's the way you made us feel. Thank you for sharing yourself with us." Their words echoed in her mind, a lasting reminder of the impact of her performance and the power of sharing one's talents openly and bravely. As the last guests departed and the room began to quiet, she sat at the piano for a moment, reflecting on what had happened. The keys beneath her fingers were familiar, yet they now held new meaning. They had been a medium for connection, for joy, and for the unexpected unfolding of a hidden gift. She felt a sense of completeness, knowing that her music had reached people, inspired admiration, and created memories that would endure. The young woman left the hall that night with a quiet smile, her heart full of the warmth and energy of the evening. She had discovered something profound about herself, the ability to step forward, embrace her talent, and touch the lives of others. The experience had been transformative, leaving her with a sense of purpose, confidence, and a renewed appreciation for the power of music and human connection. What had begun as a simple request had become a moment of magic, a testament to courage, authenticity, and the beauty that can emerge when one dares to share their hidden gifts with the world.